So what lies ahead for Joshimath and indeed towns that are nestled in the Himalayan range? Joining me now is the country's leading environmentalist, Sunita Narai, Director General, Center for Science and Environment. Appreciate your joining us, Sunita. As we play out those pictures today of Joshimath, the fears are rising that this is now spreading well beyond to other towns in the Himalayan region, which have also developed cracks. What is your sense of the road ahead? What do you now believe needs to be done on an emergency basis?
Well, currently, of course, there's crisis management, and the state government will have to gear itself up to manage this huge human tragedy that is unfolding. It's a big question, how many people will be affected, what will be the compensation. Also, the big question is where will they be resettled, because it isn't as if the Himalayas has such, you have plains, lands in the plains where people can just be settled. So it's huge issue in front, huge human issue in front, and I'm sure the state government, state governments are normally good at crisis planning, Rajdeep, so I'm sure they're going to get their act together. What concerns me more is what does this tragedy really tell us about planning in the Himalayas, and will it be the real wake-up call that will make us change, or will it be one more such? 2 years ago we had the Rishi Ganga episode, again we forgot about it, business as usual. A few years ago we had flash floods in Chamoli, and we really just don't seem to realize that we will need to plan differently for a fragile region like the Himalayas, and not make this into an unnecessary and a false narrative of environment versus development.
But Sunita, how do you plan differently? If you're saying it's a false narrative of pitting environment versus power projects, how do you then plan better? What is it that can be done now to ensure that we don't have more Joshimaths?
Good question, Rajdeep. I'll give you a real example. I was on a committee, a high-level committee in 2013 to look at the power projects that are coming up in the Himalayas. And I have real data, therefore, being part of the committee to share with you. 9,000 megawatts are being planned in the Himalayas, about 70 projects, and they're back-to-back. The engineers themselves tell you that these projects will affect the river to about 80%. It will leave the river, the projects will take up 90% of the water and will leave about 10% of the water in the lean water season. Now that's their plan. That's the development plan that they have put forward. Those are the projects that are coming up in the Himalayas today. The alternative plan that I put forward to the same committee was that, listen, we do need hydropower. Hydropower is a very clean, renewable source of power. It is also something that is an economic wealth of the Himalayas. But we need to make sure that we can mimic the flow of the river, which means that you would build your projects keeping in mind 50% of the flow will always be there in the river. You would generate less electricity during the lean season, more during the flood season. This meant, however, Rajdeep, that the 9,000 megawatts would never happen if you took this formula. The revenue earning from the current projects would continue, but many projects, including the one that we are talking about today in Joshimath, would never take off. Now, this is not environment versus development. This is not to say hydropower will not happen. This is to say that you would plan appropriately for a fragile region like the Himalayas. Why should there be an argument against this? Why should this deteriorate into an environment versus development story?
So
that's the question I'm asking.
Let me get it what you're saying. You're saying that you need possibly fewer projects after complete assessment of risk, possibly smaller in scale. Is that the direction in which you are suggesting that one will have to go to save this eco-sensitive Himalayan belt?
we should have gone. I mean, frankly, this moratorium on projects was when the projects were at 4,000 megawatt. And so now, willy-nilly, all projects have happened saying, oh, but they were in construction stage, this is development, we need it. I'm saying much more than what you have just said. I'm saying that you have to plan appropriately. The same thing comes for when you're doing buildings. The same thing comes when you're doing tourism. The same thing comes when you're doing roads. The Himalayas are the world's youngest, most fragile mountain range. They're not the Alps. They're not Sahyadris. They're not Aravallis. They are the Himalayas. And we have to plan keeping and knowing that these are mountains of moraine. These towns that are coming up today, people hate the word carrying capacity. They hate the word municipal planning, master planning. But take Nainital, take Shimla, take Joshimath, take any town. There is absolutely no master plan. There is no ability for the state to say this is where the buildings will come up. Then there is a question of appropriate architecture. Then there is a question about the seismicity. How would you build buildings for it? You would not build on the floodplains. The question I have is, why are we even discussing this today, Rajdeep? We have so many institutions based in the Himalayas. You have IIT Roorkee, you have Wadia Institute, I can name 10 premier institutions. Where are the scientists up there to tell us why is state government not listening to the scientists, or are the scientists not speaking when they have to tell governments, plan differently? This is the Himalayas. This is not a parking lot of Greater Kailash.
This is not a parking zone of Greater Kailash in Delhi. These are the Himalayas. Therefore, in conclusion, you're saying what we need now is a master plan where you can bring all the states together of the Himalayas, get the top scientists together and create a plan not just for 10 years, but possibly for the next 50. Am I right?
And use science for planning and use engineers to understand that they cannot conquer nature forever. That's the big lesson from Joshimath.
Sunita Narayan, for those very strong words at the top tonight on a day when a town in the heart of the Himalayas has seen these kind of demolitions because it is sinking. I appreciate you joining us.